And weren't like, how difficult is this problem? You said it requires like a cross-disciplinary approach. You also mentioned that you got to kind of stare at the problem to figure it out. Like, what would you guess would be the percentage of companies who have figured it out? And like, if you are to throw resources at the problem, what does that mean? Like, is it a huge sink of resources, or
So,
is
so
it
I, I probably
more
have
reasonable? Or
yeah,
do
I
they just
probably have
hire
a
you?
bias. Well, yeah, I was going to say I have a biased perspective because we're like the plumbers. Like you don't call the plumber when everything's going great. Like, and you don't call us to come and help with your UA if you've got it figured out and you're crushing it. So I probably have an overly negative and pessimistic view because I talk to almost exclusively teams that are struggling. But as far as like what it takes, I mean, there's a few ways. One is there's just kind of two meta paths. One is you work within the tool set that Apple has provided us, which on one hand has gotten better over time, but on the other hand is still leaving huge gaps from the way that we've traditionally executed UA and what you can do today.
Yep.
But I've
Mhm.
seen some companies that have said, no, we're just going to focus. We're going to work within these confines and work within the variables. We had to take a different approach. We're not developers ourselves, so we can't rely on our developers having a deep, nuanced understanding of scan modeling of what's coming out with each version. So we actually, I don't want to say ignore, but we use like the bare minimum needed data from scan, which is just the install data. So like I mean, and I always talk pretty openly. Our tools and our model is basically what I call like dynamic polling. So we just looked at the opt-ins of the users that agreed to be tracked for every segment of your campaigns and apply those monetization tendencies to the rest of the sector, getting the install count via the scan installs as source of truth for installs. So we iterated with a bunch of models. That was good for us, not being a developer, so not being able to actually implement the scan methodology and just using kind of the minimum viable piece. But I always tell people it's
Yep.
not the only way. This is just a way that worked with our business and our model. So yeah, we have like 3 engineers on our team, a couple of data scientists, a couple of UA people, and just working cross-disciplinary brainstorming, testing models with that.
Got it. And Aaron and Levi, have you guys seen other companies that have kind of figured out other approaches besides what Warren mentioned? And Warren, it's awesome you're so open about your own specific methodology. But what have you guys seen?
Yeah, I mean, where we sit, honestly, like the scan adoption is pretty limited. I mean, I think people are reliant on, Singular and others to kind of help solve that piece. So, I think the mechanisms are a little bit different. So like the targeting has certainly, like, that world has shifted upside down, and there needs to be, and there has been a bunch of innovation around how to buy more effectively in absence of any sort of profile data. And then there's the measurement piece. So, I think, the measurement piece is largely like we've kind of kicked the can on that. I think the biggest, most successful buyers are. I mean, to Warren's point, like, yes, there is some that are saying, hey, we're going to use Apple's tool set exclusively, but it's a pretty conservative approach given what the rest of the market's doing right now, in my opinion. So we don't see that as a like big part of kind of successful programmatic buys right now, but I know it's there.
Yeah. So I think, we're talking with many types of advertisers, the small ones, the huge ones, the ones who are more conservative, the ones who don't care really. So there's definitely a mix of methodologies out there. They're the ones who kind of say, yeah, we're doing like what we used to do, like with the opt-in IDFAs and with using probabilistic, and it works for many of the channels out there, and we just keep doing that. And for some advertisers, that works. I think a lot for the long tail advertisers, also for the advertisers who don't run on Facebook, for example, or the major channels who only have IDFA opt-ins or scan, basically, right? So it just depends a bit on the media mix, the type of app that you're trying to advertise. It's definitely not for everyone, although a lot of the market is kind of using more like still keeping the device level data and just like limiting more of their channels. Then the other side, kind of more like what Levi mentioned, the more kind of conservative maybe companies. Some of them are like very large scale brands. Are kind of saying, yeah, we're kind of exactly like Ron said, limited to kind of Apple's tools, like heavily in SKA network, doing a lot of modeling on top of that. And yes, like I mean, obviously we're coming from a bad view because we're like hiring like their infrastructure, especially like putting an emphasis on scan and kind of making the most out of it. I would say that yes, the sophisticated advertisers out there, they're trying to use a combination, doing modeling on scan, but also definitely using the IDFA opt-ins to kind of apply it. Sometimes they use it for correlations, right? Making sure to compare the scan models with the IDFA data, so making sure it makes sense. Sometimes it's the kind of the addition of those two things. There are others who take even more, like there are other tools out there. Think about, for example, like the custom product pages that Apple provides. So you can actually create a link to a specific custom product page in the App Store of your app, and then you can get actually statistics from the App Store on your installs and purchases coming from that page. So there are ones who kind of combining basically everything together. So you're looking at IDFA opt-ins, scan installs and model data, and then custom product pages results. So you can see that there are multiple approaches there. It's all like around like data modeling, data comparisons, data correlations, and all of that. And yeah, and again, it changes by the company. But there's multiple tools, multiple ways to do this, and it's definitely not dead again.
One kind of pain point that extends outside of the UA practitioner to the businesses is like, okay, cool, we developed a system to buy for iOS, Facebook, and for Apple Search, which is using its own logic, and for the SDK networks, which are still using probabilistic. Like, how does the CFO and the finance team still judge like iOS versus Google and what's working, what's not, and where to put that next dollar when we have like different lenses for these different categories of traffic? We've seen that also be a big pain point for businesses.
For sure. And maybe kind of to add to that, definitely one of the hot topics that's been like decreasing dramatically in the last, 6 months or a year is the whole notion of like medium mix modeling and incrementality measurement. And I'm thinking more on like those are the ones that we actually need to kind of answer to the CFO, exactly like you're saying. It's beyond like the specific campaign optimization, but what's the overall marketing contribution? How much of it is really incremental versus not? And I think there's a lot more, obviously, again, we've been kind of focusing on our own kind of media mix modeling product to help these type of advertisers. And again, there's like the whole debate around that, like where is it applicable, how accurate it is, like where can you use it and all that. So it's like a topic on its own. But it's another tool set another possible tool that marketers can use also to assess their overall performance in maybe a more consistent way across channels in a more strategic way.